for today. So, before we start talking about what's going to happen in this lesson, let's talk about what we learned last time. So, last time, remember, we were talking about Prophet Ezekiel. So, before that, we talked about how Ezekiel had a vision, a great and terrifying vision. And then last time, we talked about how God told Ezekiel, don't say anything, but show the people my message. And finally, when the message of Ezekiel ended, the last thing he showed the people is he took his hair and he cut it with a sword that he had sharpened and sharpened and sharpened. And then some of the hair he threw into the fire. Some of the hair was scattered by the wind. Some of the hair was trampled and destroyed. But even as all of the hair went everywhere, Ezekiel took his time and collected as many pieces as he could find. Then he wrapped them in a cloth. And the people guessed that this represented Jerusalem and the people of Jerusalem, who, when Jerusalem was attacked, some died during the attack, and others were scattered everywhere. And it showed that God still cared about his people, because Ezekiel took the hairs, collected them, and kept them safe. In the same way, God was going to do the same thing for his people. He was going to collect as many as he can find and take care of them. So now let's see what happens next to Ezekiel.
So now Ezekiel continued to tell the people about the bad things that will happen, but he also gave them hope, and God continued to show Ezekiel the bright future that was ahead. And now one day Ezekiel had another vision. Remember, he had the previous vision and now he's having another one.
Vision.
And in his vision, he was in a valley and he was surrounded by bones everywhere, bones of every kind, and they were everywhere. And God asked Ezekiel, are these bones able to come back to life? And Ezekiel was confused, and he told God, only you know the answer. But God told Ezekiel, tell the bones to come back to life, and I will give them life.
So Ezekiel did exactly as God had told him to do. Remember, dry bones everywhere of all shapes and sizes. And Ezekiel said in a loud voice, dry bones, come back to life. God says he will give you life again. And then after Ezekiel's voice faded away, he had a rattling sound and a rustling sound, and there were all of these noises. And when he looked at the dry bones that were everywhere, they started to move and come together. And then they grew muscles. So now they were connected like a skeleton. And then on top of the skeleton, they grew new skin. So remember, we've gone from dry bones to them moving together, to them growing muscles, and then forming a skeleton, and then growing a new skin. So instead of dry bones around Ezekiel, now it looked like they were bodies. And then God told Ezekiel, command the wind to blow and breathe air into the bodies. So that's exactly what Ezekiel did. And the wind blew and it breathed air into the bodies, and the chests of the bodies started to rise and fall, almost as if they were breathing. And then slowly all of the bodies stood up. So from dry bones to the bones coming together, to growing muscles, to forming a skeleton, and then growing new skin, and then the chests rising and falling, and finally the bodies stood up again. And then Ezekiel's vision ended.
So now we've seen that the bones, they became skeletons, and there were muscles, and there was skin, and there was life breathed into it, and they stood up. So now God told Ezekiel that my people are like these dry bones, but I can bring them back to life. Just like the bones, they moved from being bones and they were skeleton and they grew muscle and skin, I can bring my people back to life, and they will know that I am their God, and I can take them back to their land, and I will give them new life and new beginnings.
So children, what we learn from this story is that God can fix all dead things and he can bring them back to life. So children, dead things can be anything that you think is broken or that cannot be fixed, but you need to know and you need to believe that God can fix all things, because again, he gave life to the dry bones, and the same way he fixed the dry bones, he can fix anything that we think cannot be fixed or that we think is impossible to do. So now it's time for us to sing our song. So everyone stand up and help us sing this song. Okay kids, it's time for us to sing our song. Now, we've just talked about how in Ezekiel's vision, God told Ezekiel, tell the dry bones to come alive again. And Ezekiel did as God said, and the dry bones came alive again. Now, to remind us of this story, we are going to sing a song about these dry bones. So everyone stand up and help us sing this song. These bones, these bones, these dry bones, these bones, these bones, these dry bones, these bones, these bones, these dry bones. Now hear the word of the Lord. Ezekiel cracked them, dry bones. Ezekiel cracked them, dry bones. Ezekiel cracked them, dry bones. Now hear the word of the Lord. And the foot bone connected to the leg bone, and the leg bone connected to the knee bone, and the knee bone connected to the thigh bone. Now hear the word of the Lord. These bones, these bones, these dry bones, these bones, these bones, these dry bones, these bones, these bones, these dry bones. Now hear the word of the Lord. And the thigh bone connected to the backbone, and the backbone connected to the neck bone, and the neck bone connected to the head bone. Now hear the word of the Lord. These bones, these bones, these dry bones, these bones, these bones, these dry bones, these bones, these bones, these dry bones. Now hear the word of the Lord. Ezekiel cracked them, dry bones. Ezekiel cracked them, dry bones. Ezekiel cracked them, dry bones. Now hear the word of the Lord. Now hear the word of the Lord. Now hear the word of the Lord. Yeah. Okay kids, it's time for us to do our craft. Now, we've just talked about how Ezekiel told the bones, dry bones, come alive again, just like God had told him to, and the dry bones came alive again. So, to remember this story of ours, we are going to make a skeleton, because that's what happened to the bones. They were dry bones, and then they came together, and they grew muscles, and they formed a skeleton, and then the skeleton grew skin, and then there was air, and then they breathed in, and their chest rose and fell, and then they finally stood on their feet. So to remember this vision that Ezekiel had, we're going to write at the very top of our cards, we're going to write Ezekiel chapter 5 to chapter 7, which is where we find this amazing story. And then we're going to have our skeleton. So whenever you see it, you remember that God can bring dead things back to life and he can fix anything. So let's get started. So for this craft, we have a straw, and what we did with this straw is that we cut it into several pieces of different sizes. So we have 3 sizes. We have the very small pieces, which we are using for the ribs and to connect our legs to the body. So these 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are the very small pieces. And then we have the arms and the legs. So these are the bones for the legs, and these are the ones for the arms, and they are all the same size. And then we have the connection from the neck and what is connecting the ribs. So we have this backbone, and it is going to be a little bit longer. So the backbone is the longest piece we'll have. And then we have the piece for the hands, and the legs is the same size. Then we have the pieces for the ribs, which are the smallest pieces that we will have. Then we have this circle over here on top, which we cut from manila paper, and we're going to draw our face, and then we're going to stick it down, and then we're going to connect our entire skeleton. So once you have your pieces cut, I want you to put away all of your pieces carefully, because we'll start with those ones later. But first of all, we need to start by drawing our face. So put your pieces away carefully. And then let's draw our face. So take your pen and draw a face. Once you have your face, that's the first thing we're going to stick down. So I want you to take glue and stick your face down. And with this face, once you've stuck your face down, you'll be able to measure where the rest of the parts are supposed to go. Okay, now comes the more difficult part. We have to stick down each of our straws. So take the longest straw that you have. Remember, we said the longest one is going to be our neck plus our backbone. So take the longest straw that you have, take glue, and try and place it carefully at the center from where your head is. So you put your glue down first, and then you press your straw onto where you have placed your glue. And this is how we're going to try and stick each of our straw pieces. Press it down and don't touch it, because until it dries, it will still continue to move. But just press it down and make sure every part of your stick, your straw, is touching the glue. Then we continue by joining the rest of our straws. So next we're going to work on the hands. Now remember, the hands were our medium-sized straws. So take a medium-sized straw and carefully put glue down. It's okay if your other piece moves because the glue is not dry yet. Carefully put the glue down and then stick your hand in its position. Remember, place it carefully, and for this one we have to make sure that they are kind of touching, and leave a little bit of space so that your character has a neck. So we'll do one hand and then we'll do the other hand. Remember, all the hands are the medium-sized pieces that we have. So once you've done one hand, carefully do the other hand, the same way you did the first one. So remember, glue first, then place the hand carefully and make sure it's connected to the backbone. And the same for the other side. Okay, so far we have the backbone and we have our hands done. So next we're going to connect all of the ribs. Now the ribs are the smaller pieces, the tiny pieces of the straw that we cut. So we're going to connect all of those. So these ones you need to be very careful. So I'm going to put a lot of glue next to where my backbone is. And then I'll stick all 3 ribs on one side and do the same thing on the other side. Okay? So that's one side done, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. Glue enough for the 3 pieces, and then I'll carefully place all 3 pieces down, making sure that they connect to the backbone and that they almost make a straight line from one piece on one side to the piece on the other side. Okay, and we're almost done. Now all we have left to do is the legs. So remember, for the legs we'll start with 2 small pieces, and then we'll go to the medium-sized pieces and connect our legs to our skeleton. So glue right underneath our backbone. We'll place glue, and then we'll place both of the small pieces, and they'll be connecting to each other right underneath the backbone. Then we'll take the medium-sized pieces and we're going to use them to form our leg bones. So leg bone on one side, then I'll just take it and place it there, and leg bone at the bottom to complete our skeleton. Remember to be very careful, because until the glue dries, all of these pieces will be moving. So do the same thing for the leg on the other side. And finally finish off with your last leg bone. Okay, and now our skeleton is almost complete. We just need to do a few more things. We need to draw fingers and we need to draw feet. So we're just going to draw a straight line. So from the end of where you have your leg bone, I want you to take your pen and draw a straight line. And this is going to represent the foot. Make it as thick as possible so you can see it from far away. And do the same thing on the other side. So now we have 2 feet. Okay, now we need to draw the fingers. So on one side, draw the thumb, just a straight line, and then 4 fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now do the same thing on the other hand. Okay, and now our skeleton is almost complete. We just have to write where our memory verse is coming from. So take another pen of a different color, and at the very bottom or at the top, whichever place you want to write, I want you to write Ezekiel chapter 5 to chapter 7. So it's 5, 6, and 7. In this story, what happens? The dry bones come alive. So just at the bottom, write the dry bones come alive. Okay, and that is our craft for today. So now the only thing left is we need to wait for it to dry, and once it dries, we have our skeleton craft. And when we look at it, we'll remember that in Ezekiel's vision, the dry bones came alive, and God said, this is exactly what I will do for my people who are stuck in Babylon. I will bring them out and I will give them a new life. So this is our craft for today, and that has been our lesson for today. Until next time, bye.